I'm Nathan with Blue Oak. I'm going to talk about the dangers of a barber chair scenario with felling leaning trees and how to mitigate the risk of that barber chair with a plunge cut or a bore cut. I'm going to use this as a prop to kind of explain. Let's talk about what a barber chair is. A barber chair is, like, envision this being a giant tree, and then as it's falling, you know, you're doing your back cut and you just want it to kind of fall like that and lay down, right? But a barber chair is when it's under a lot of strain and the fibers separate in the middle, and as it's falling, this whole part will actually start to split, and then the forward part will actually not go anywhere. It'll sort of stay there, and as it splits like that, the whole tree can split in half, or a chunk of it, even just a small chunk like this, can break off and then fall. So notice that, like, if a barber chair happens, the climber, or not, I'm sorry, not the climber, but the sawyer is going to be right here. He's going to be cutting. He's going to assume that he's safe as the tree goes that way. But if a barber chair happens, it'll split up and it can fall, and it can actually fall behind the tree itself. The broken off fragments can fall behind the tree, opposite the direction of the fell. And that's why your escape path is supposed to be 45 degrees. You're supposed to have two escape paths going 45 degrees out. You're not supposed to try to escape straight backwards, because that's the most likely area to get hit if a split happens. Okay, so that's what a barber chair is. Let's talk about, like, what makes for a higher potential. What makes for a higher potential of that splitting is when the tree is already leaning the way you want it to go. Now that seems counterintuitive, because people think, oh, well, it's leaning the way I want, so this is an easy one to cut. And so they think, oh, I can cut this because it's leaning the way I want it to go anyway. Well, that is actually a more dangerous scenario. And when you start getting into bigger trees, like these are medium-sized trees, but they're big enough. They're big enough to be really dangerous. But as you start getting into bigger and bigger trees, the weight on that lean is just so powerful. You start doing your back cut, you do your notch, you think everything's fine, you start doing your back cut, and next thing you know, it just starts to split up the trunk, and it can be an extremely dangerous situation for the sawyer, okay? So now we're gonna move into how to mitigate against that risk, and we're gonna do that with a plunge cut. I'm doing my tree assessment here. I know that I have plenty of space to land this thing out into the field. I've got an escape path sort of right here, relatively clear. I know what this tree is. It's ash. I know it's dead, killed by emerald ash borer. I look up at to see if it's intertangled with this other one. We're going to be dropping both of these. All right. I'm just going to take it with its lean, so I'm not worried about assessing side lean. And we're gonna just plunge cut. Now, I'm gonna warm the saw up. I wanna say this too. When we're doing our plunge cut, even doing a plunge cut, you can still get your bar pinched if the tree is big enough and heavy enough. I don't think these trees are big enough for me to have to worry about that, but you can do like a slightly shallower face cut if you are worried about that, and you can do your plunge closer to where your hinge is going to end and leave as much wood intact as possible, and then start carving out backwards and make sure that your tip is not close to the apex of your hinge while you start taking away a lot of that wood. Otherwise, the tree can actually pinch your bar even though you have left a back strap. I've done it before. I'll try to explain that a little bit more as I'm actually demonstrating this cut. Always move this, when the trunk lands on it, it can actually shoot back at the upper, at the sawyer. Hard to believe, but. All right, so I did a you know, not too shallow, but that's as far deep as you really want to go with these leaners. You want to leave a lot more of that wood on the in the trunk intact so that you have plenty of space to get your bore in, to get your plunge in. You have plenty of space to get your plunge in behind your apex, then come in, set the hinge, and you haven't cleared out so much of the tree that the weight of it actually starts to squish down on your bar. All right, that's really important. If you make your notch too deep, especially with these leaners that are under a lot of heavy weight going this way, then as you're doing your plunge cut, it could actually just sink onto your bar, and then you're really stuck. I'm gonna now do my plunge cut. I'm gonna come off this apex a little bit, like out here. I have to start like kind of on with the pulling side of my bar tip, the pulling quadrant of my bar tip, and I'm going to slowly turn into it and drive on through. I don't want to ruin my hinge while I'm doing this, so I'm going to give it a little bit of extra space. Then I'm going to come forward and set my hinge, check it on both corners, and then I'm going to just kind of seesaw it out this way. I'm just going to kind of go out this way, and that's the part where I need to be careful not to leave my tip, not to let my tip get too close to the apex. As I'm clearing out all that wood, the tree will start to compress pretty heavily right here, okay? And then you can either set a back strap and then release the trigger if you want, or you can just come straight out the back cut and the whole thing will go immediately. I'm gonna tell my ground guys that I'm just gonna come straight out the back to make this a little quicker. All right, so be advised. And then I'm going to call that good. This is the part where I don't want my tip I really don't want my bar to be close to that apex anymore. Because again, as I'm clearing out this wood, the tree is going to start compressing on this front side. It still did a barber chair. That still did a barber chair. And I mean, that's just the nature of these ashes that are like super dry after they've been killed by the EAV. They lose a lot of their elasticity. But it's a lot better than what it could have been. All right, let's do this one. So, learned a couple things on that one. Actually got to demonstrate a barber chair, even though my hinge was the proper thickness for a normal tree. 10% the diameter of where you're cutting, the diameter of the trunk, 10%. That's what you're supposed to do. So if you have a 10-inch tree, you should have a 1-inch hinge. 20-inch tree should be a 2-inch hinge, and so on. But in this case, again, the tree is like prone for it. So I'm gonna make this next one even thinner. I'm gonna go probably like 5% or something. And we'll see if that hinges over better. But another thing I want to point out that happened is that limb, which Jason just moved, it landed right here because it was crisscrossed into this tree. And I did assess that when I was doing my assessment. So I was kind of back where I needed to be, but the cameraman was a little close, and we're thankful that he didn't get hit. But that's why that's another reason why that escape is so important. It's not just for barber chairs. It's also for hangers that come dislodged, or if you're pulling vines over that you didn't notice are in that tree and it pulls another tree down with it. There's all kinds of good reasons to have a good escape path. Anyway, let's see if this one goes a little better. Oh, and the tradition here at Blue Oak is if you have a barber chair, then you have to sit on and get your picture with it. So it's kind of like wearing the little cone of shame on your
dunce cap.
And move the mini skid a little closer to that little, yeah, right in there. And then you also, because we do have side lean this time that way. Oh, that's another thing I need to mention. If the hinge doesn't work, like in that case, I was okay because the lean was so committed over there. But in this case, we have a little bit of side lean as well. So if that happens again, then the hinge is not steering the tree. So it could like fracture and then all of a sudden just go totally off course because it has no holding wood to steer it. So I'm actually going to tell him to move it to the other side. Hey, Chief, let me get you to move it out there. Just in case. No, that's really important. Like, it's not just the danger of being hit with a piece of fragmented trunk that the barber chair is a problem for. It also throws off your felling aim completely. The weight of the tree becomes the deciding factor of where the tree ends up going because the hinge effectively doesn't ever kick in and doesn't ever do its job. I have a much thinner hinge this time. Right? Now that is what was supposed to happen the first time. So you can see this is very different. This hinge worked. I mean, it's still very brittle, but you know, I made it thinner. So it helped it do its job. That hinge didn't work at all. There was no hinge. It barber chaired, and then it pivoted off this thing. And you saw how that stump kind of went, whoa, like way up in the air and then kind of fell over to the side like that. So there's no control. Again, the only thing that made that tree fall forward at that point was its own weight, not the hinge. But what made this tree fall in that line, the lay of that line there, was the hinge, because it was actually weighted that way a little bit. So if that one had done what this one did, then you would have seen it just suddenly split and probably just kind of curl off to the right like that. That's probably what would have happened. So, hope this was an educational video. Got to show you some real life mistakes that were not rehearsed, and learn from those mistakes and be safe out there. Thanks for watching.